The pronouncement, God is dead, diagnoses a catastrophe of human understanding, a total collapse of the methods we use to establish objective meaning and truth. For over a millennium, the intellectual scaffolding of Europe relied on a specific metaphysical guarantee. Platonism and Christianity provided the foundation for objective truth, morality, and human purpose. Without that central pillar, the entire moral architecture is suspended over a void. Our definitions of good and evil, our altruistic concerns, and our sense of universal justice are suddenly deprived of their foundation and destined to fail. Humanity has been unchained from its center. We are plunged into a paralyzing teleological void, a state where inherent, universal meaning and predetermined purpose no longer exist. The collapse originates in the will to truth that Christianity cultivated. That same drive for honesty eventually investigated and exposed its own religious foundations as historical fabrications. This illustrates European nihilism. Without absolute foundations, our highest values systematically devalue themselves. Honesty now demands rational proof for moral commitments, proof an indifferent universe cannot provide. The resulting psychological condition is passive nihilism, recognizing the void but becoming paralyzed by the loss. Surviving this paralysis requires the subject to reactivate their creative capacities and force a transition into active nihilism. The rule of our existence has shifted. We can no longer discover moral values inherent in the fabric of the world. We are forced to create them from nothing. Successfully navigating this transition requires a ruthless diagnostic dismantling. We must investigate the decayed traditional values we mistakenly continue to cling to. The philosopher's role is to act as a hammer, a tool used to meticulously diagnose and shatter the life-denying values of traditional morality. In his late work on the genealogy of morality, Nietzsche presents a stark historical claim. Far from being a universal truth, our common-sense altruistic morality is a highly specific historical innovation. This innovation was triggered by a slave revolt in morality, executed by the powerless masses against the strong, excellent, and uninhibited nobility. The driving psychological mechanism behind this revolt was resentment. Resentment is a persistent emotional pattern of resentful hatred directed at enemies, unable to be acted upon physically due to powerlessness. This underlying resentment weaponized traditional morality by completely linguistically inverting reality. Weakness and poverty were rebranded as goodness, while strength and nobility were condemned as evil. Unable to strike outward, this conceptual framework internalized human aggression. It turned that aggression inward against the self, manufacturing psychological constructs like guilt, spiritual debt, and the bad conscience. This Judeo-Christian moral structure is life-denying. It condemns earthly existence, demanding that we repent our actual lives for an illusory afterlife. These moral instincts function as a psychological poison, designed by the weak to suppress human flourishing, making their total destruction a necessity for the restoration of ethical health. With the old values dismantled, the focus shifts to the mechanism required to construct new ones. In a post-God universe, the foundational drive of all living things is the will to power. The will to power is the drive to overcome resistance, master the self, and assert an interpretation onto a chaotic reality. Value creation is the highest manifestation of the will to power. A strong subject molds the indifference of nature into a meaningful, life-affirming structure.
The weak default to obeying external, inherited commands. The strong engage in the difficult task of self-commanding. A newly created value is only valid if it stems from an overflowing strength that enhances life, rather than from a reaction of weakness, fear, or resentment. This raises a central problem for value creation. Without a God to judge, how can a subject test the weight and validity of their newly created, self-asserted values? To test this validity, Nietzsche introduces his ultimate ontological thought experiment, the eternal recurrence of the same. The test assumes an infinite timeline, but a finite configuration of matter and forces. Under these conditions, your exact life must repeat in the exact same sequence, infinitely. Every single pain, every fleeting joy and every mundane detail will return endlessly. This permanence strips away any hope of future salvation, heavenly redemption, or historical progress. Nietzsche describes this realization as the heaviest weight. It is a terrifying cosmological concept purpose-built to instantly crush the passive nihilist who relies on external hope. The only successful response to this test is amor fati, the active love of one's fate, without desiring a single moment to be different. Staring into the infinite, unalterable repetition of existence and actively affirming it proves that a value is an expression of sovereign strength. Who is actually capable of surviving the crushing psychological weight of eternal recurrence and sustaining the required state of amor fati? To answer this, Nietzsche introduces the Übermensch, or the overman, as the necessary human exemplar for a post-God universe. Modern humanity serves only as a transition. We are, in Nietzsche's words, a rope tied between beast and Übermensch, a rope over an abyss. The Übermensch creates their own teleology, navigating the absence of objective truth by positing an independent moral framework. This exemplar is free of ressentiment. They affirm earthly existence exactly as it is, without relying on otherworldly hopes or external validations. The Übermensch bridges the void of meaninglessness by physically embodying the highest possible affirmation of earthly life, justifying existence from within. The epistemological shift is absolute. The old sun is gone, and the comforting illusions of metaphysical justice will never return. The cosmos operates as an indifferent play of forces, devoid of mercy, universal purpose, or objective morality. In the face of an infinite, unfeeling universe, existence can only be justified aesthetically. We must accept the permanent eclipse and actively will our own light into the dark.